Protecting indigenous people's rights is protecting everyone's rights. UNESCO Chief Irina Bokova. To the honorable judges, committees of IREC, and all the audiences, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Khansa Maritza, and I'm here to deliver my speech. So we're now facing a global pandemic, which is COVID-19 disease. We can't go to school, college, and work like we used to. We are required to stay at home and wear our mask everywhere and every time we go outside. We also have an online class system, and probably some of us may think this is not an effective system. However, we should continue to live with these new normal things. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about indigenous peoples, the data from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, United Nations, shows that there are more than 476 million indigenous peoples and spread over more than 70 countries in the world. Indigenous peoples are more than 6% of the world population. As we know, indigenous peoples usually lived in isolated areas where out of reach from our environment. For the time being, the indigenous community's life is about 20 years lower than non-indigenous peoples. As we've seen in the economic side, most of indigenous peoples are poor. They compose 15% of the world's poverty. So, they need an economic development to reduce the world's poverty. Economic development are influenced by these factors: natural resources, such as land and biodiversity, human resources, social system, infrastructure, and technology. As I've mentioned before, that the indigenous peoples are composed 15% of the world's poverty, so they need an economic development. The data shows that the indigenous communities hold 80% biodiversity of this world. It means they have rich natures and local wisdom. From here, non-indigenous can help provide facilities such as promoting and advertising their products in order to increase their economy. Ladies and gentlemen, our country itself, Indonesia, has many cultures, languages, and ethnicities spread all over the country. And some of ethnic are in isolated areas where there is no electricity. They are usually called suku pedalaman. Nevertheless, they have amazing cultures and traditions. Here I'm gonna put Baduy tribe's case. They live in West Java, and yet far from the general human life. They don't want their environment to be tourism destination. Meanwhile, tourism is one of the factors of economic development because tourism can support the local economies. They are synergized to protect the natures. Even animals, except dogs, are prohibited to enter their area. Neither they refuse to face changes, modernization, development from out of their area, and even education because it was their ancestors' traditions. Besides that, they are still human beings. They have the same rights as us. Their rights need to be protected because protecting indigenous people's rights is protecting everyone's rights. Because not all isolated tribes thought the same way as that. Well, some of them, such as Dayak tribe communities in Kalimantan, they have high awareness about their children's education and healthcare system. In Papua, as we know, they have amazing natures that make many foreigner investors to invest in their land. Tribes in Papua are totally okay with that, as long as the investors understand about the cultures and tradition. The government and nation also should respect and protect their natural resources, local wisdom, and socio-cultural characteristics in each indigenous communities' lands. Audiences. Communities who had minority rights can be identified by these characteristics: non-dominant ethnicity, language, religion, or anything less than the population that dominant in some areas. Minority can also be identified by the communities who have weak influence, control, and authority. In terms of that, indigenous peoples can be included as the minority. They have different language, ethnic, culture, and tradition. Mostly, indigenous communities had minority rights. Why? Because they are suffered about discrimination, marginalization, and exploitation. They are even prohibited to speak or use their own language. An estimated 600 indigenous languages had been extinct. They keep facing discrimination just because they have different language. According to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has contributed to the diversity and richness of civilization and cultures. They conserve and restore to the natural resources, therefore we can deal with climate change. Thus, government has taken a law to protect their rights. The United Nations even made a declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples to protect their rights. The declaration contains indigenous communities' cultural rights, education rights, healthcare system rights, and others. The declaration also affirming that the indigenous peoples are equal to all other peoples, so that the indigenous peoples are free from any kind of racism and discrimination and need to be respected. Audiences. The point is based on how we manage it. I believe that the indigenous people's rights can be protected and we can have an economic development as long as we know, understand, and respect to their culture, and by approaching them in sociology and anthropology ways so that we can communicate with them and developing the economics step by step. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to deliver my speech. Don't forget to wash your hands regularly, wear your mask, stay healthy, and stay safe. Thank you.